So I keep hearing this term P card thrown around in my professional circles, and I feel like I should probably know this, but seriously, what's a P card? How is it different from what I might otherwise call a business card?
Well, wait, hold on a second. They're synonymous with each other.
Are they?
Yeah. Like a P card is just like a business corporate credit card, kind of the same thing.
That is Matt Schultz. He's a procurement expert at Ramp and the perfect person to help me understand this term. And not just the definition, but also what's implied when people call it a P card instead of a business card, because it sounds like P cards, more specifically than business cards, are for enabling employees to make purchases for the company.
Think about a P card, a procurement card, as essentially the corporate business card. In other words, I'm an employee and I want to buy something. Think, gosh, I don't know, maybe you want to get a team lunch. And instead of doing a full purchase order and going through an entire procurement cycle, I just pull out the P card and I swipe it and everyone gets tacos.
Okay, and is that P card specifically for buying lunches or buying tacos?
Well, I think early on, historically, a lot of companies, one, they were reluctant to use P cards or purchase cards because it was hard to control who was buying what. Lunches, great. Team morale, love it. But if you're going to buy a big piece of software or technology, think of it $50,000, $100,000 a year. Maybe there's some other things you want to consider when you're buying that. So instead of just whipping out a credit card and dropping six figures on a piece of software, maybe you want to check out, hey, does this thing fit into our infrastructure? Can we reduce risk? What about the compliance? And so there are other things to take into consideration.
Matt, maybe can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you know a lot more about P cards than I do?
I got into the space by way of doing technology implementations. I was working for the public sector, both the state and federal levels. And the thing about that is anytime I wanted to buy a piece of technology and bring it in to help digitize often these manual labor-intensive workflows, procurement got involved. So I did that for a handful of years, probably 5 or 6 between the two. And then I took that skill set and jumped into the private sector. I ended up landing at a PE-backed fintech firm, which was awesome. I was doing some corporate project management back into technology implementations, and they needed somebody to stand up procurement. And I was like, well, I think I know a little bit about that. Anytime I wanted to buy something, they were there. The interesting thing is that I didn't have a ton of experience within procurement, but because of that, it was kind of a blessing in disguise in that I ended up doing it a little bit differently.
Can you give me any examples of how you've used purchase cards in the past, or maybe even better, like an example of a time when you probably should have used a purchase card and like what was the result of not doing so?
I mean, we had them, we had P cards, but the problem was that we had limited visibility into it. In other words, we were using, an older bank for our corporate credit cards, our purchase cards. And because we had a little bit of turnover in the finance role, we did not see all the spend that was coming through. In other words, we were lacking those controls and the context. And we went to go and reconcile and take a peek at what had been happening. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, this is a fintech company, but why are we buying used clothes? And the further we dug in, it was about 90 days later, we'd found out that somebody probably bought themselves a new wardrobe to the tune of about $15,000. So it's a case in point where it's good to have an easy tool to buy things, but at the same time, the context, the controls around it so that things like this do not happen.
It's a lot of money to spend on used clothes.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, geez, what?
That doesn't sound like an
what
accident.
No, I don't think so either. Kind of a case in point, or a way in which a lot of businesses had thought about it rather than handing out more cards, they actually started to pull them in. Fewer cards meant a way to reduce risk. But in doing so, you limit the ability or the speed to which you can buy things.
Right. I assume if everyone doesn't have kind of the agency to go out and do what they need to, then that probably introduces a bunch of like approval workflows and other overhead.
That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly it. In other words, think back in the day, we'd write these hand checks and mail them out. Or to digitize that, we'd do purchase orders and put them into a system. And that purchase order then, depending on the value or how much is being bought, would go through several approvals, ultimately getting to a signature with a contract. And now using a corporate credit card or a P card that has controls on it, you can start fine-tuning who can spend what, the amounts, where, when, and it's really, really helpful.
So it sounds like spending controls are kind of a big deal and maybe something that more traditional P cards might have lacked, which got me wondering, What are some more modern options, and what's it really like to use them? Better spending controls for employers and less overhead for the employees who use them? Really?
So you cited a more traditional procurement card that didn't have that sort of control and visibility into the spending. What are some other options out there that are more modern? And like what kind of tools do they have that help out with that control and
Yeah.
visibility?
Well, I mean, full plug here, Ramp. I think some of the historical competitors in the space, think American Express. Amex has been around for a long time. People are really familiar with them because of their personal credit cards. Then you've got alternatives like Bank of America. They have a corporate credit card program. Then there are newcomers to the space, think Brex, Ramp, and they're really focused on building beautiful technology that's easy and simple to use on top of the credit card so that you have some of that context and those additional controls built in, whereas the historic players don't.
You'd mentioned with the that previous example that it took you guys a while to figure out that this unapproved spend was happening. With the more modern software, are there tools and stuff that help you identify that quicker?
Yeah, totally. In fact, it almost wouldn't have mattered that there was so much turnover in that finance seat. The individual who was looking at the statements coming in monthly or on a weekly basis or what have you. In this case, think of corporate credit card that's got modern technology attached to it. I'm getting notifications on my phone. I know when somebody has overspent or when they've spent in a category that that card was not allotted to. Think of a business setting or environment. Some people don't want employees spending on alcohol or during a team meeting or rather a team dinner. Maybe there's a limit, 75 per person. And if they're all spending 150 and buying some Dom, what's going on? What happened to this team party?
Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on specifically how Ramp deals with this? Like what sorts of controls and context do you get with the Ramp card?
Yeah, jokingly, I showed up at Ramp 4 months ago, and I've been telling all my friends and family, our prospects and customers, Ramp is my new favorite text thread. And the reason I say that is
Hmm.
because I'll run around with a virtual card or my corporate credit card, and I do a lot of travel for work. And it knows when I'm in New York and I've arrived on a specific day and I'm having my coffee in the morning. Well, I'll pull it out, and moments later, within seconds, it knows the merchant that I've spent my money at to get that coffee and immediately texts me and lets me know that it's already been coded to the GL. In other words, I don't have to do anything. When I get back from that trip, I'm not doing any expense reports. It's just
Hmm.
simplified. My manager gets a notification. In fact, the entire organization does because we dog food our own product.
What was the last trip you took on it?
I was actually just in New York. We had a event on our new rooftop just opened up. So we invited a bunch of procurement and finance folks and welcomed them in, and it was pretty cool.
Could you open up your text with Ramp? And what's the last
Yes.
thing that you got from Ramp?
Let's go for it. Hold on. Let's check it
Okay.
out. Okay. So I was just with a prospect and we went out to lunch. So we were at Seasons 52. So we grabbed lunch, and here, I mean, it's that easy. It just texts me, lets me know, and by the time I got to the parking lot, it was already coded all the way to the end. Finance had taken care of it, and I was off with my day.
If someone's typing in this question, what is a P card? Like, what can we tell them that answers the question?
I mean, look, Google Trends, what is a P card? Ever since 2019, 2020, think about it, that's the time modern technology really started to get attached to corporate credit cards. It just
Mhm.
spikes. And I'd also add that was about the time of COVID, and you had a lot
Mhm.
of people that were no longer in office. So if they still needed to make purchases, maybe they started to think, hey, corporate credit cards are an alternative here. Same thing with virtual cards. No longer are you just running around with a plastic or metal card in your pocket or your purse. Apple Wallet, and it's easily accessible. So that makes sense.
It's interesting you brought up the virtual card. I noticed it when you were
Yeah,
talking about your trip recently. You held up your phone
it's
as your
totally.
as your credit card. I mean, that sounds like another kind of nice benefit of going with a platform like Ramp is, being able to adopt this and then just distribute these P cards virtually. Like you don't have to wait for
Totally.
something to come in the mail.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, when I joined Ramp, I had a P card, my purchase card, my credit card, the same day. And a few days later, sure, snail mail, the actual card showed up, but I could start using it immediately. And you can put those spend programs together on the card virtually so that when you're going out for lunch or getting coffee or you're traveling, you can just tap to pay.
So P-Card is just a corporate card, but specifically one that enables employees to make purchases for the company. And modern options like Ramp really do reduce a lot of the hassle traditionally associated with expense reports, while also giving employers more control over how their money gets spent. Big thanks to Matt for catching me up on what seemed like a pretty simple question, but he added some personal color to make it interesting. And if you learned as much as I did, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Ramp for more expert tips on how your company can save time and save money. See you next time.